Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to the CI Chit Chat. We got things upgraded here. Diana's got us all fancy here with going with the uh, I don't know, fancier version of Zoom here, I guess. Let's go through some upgrades. We are off and rolling. It looks like if you've got questions and stuff, you have to raise a hand, and I'll pull you in, and you can ask a question live, or use the chat or Q&A function. I'll monitor things and as we go along here. So let's get things going though. Welcome back. CI, we're talking carbon intensity, we're talking 45Z, we're talking decarbonizing corn, soybeans, biofuel, and a lot of exciting things happening here after the big beautiful bill. Things moving forward with the 45Z tax credit. Remember, 45Z is for low carbon liquid biofuels. So ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, that's the main, stuff to be thinking about. And the tax credit is in effect right now for this calendar year. We're still just waiting on some of the final rules, but there's updates, there's things that are going on. Nothing too crazy on my side, so we'll see. Maybe we'll be able to wrap up a little bit early, but plenty of time to take your questions if you've got questions. So toss those in the Q&A function or in the chat. I've got time to be able to get to them here today. So some of the latest stuff, and maybe aftermath of Big Beautiful Bill first. So Big Beautiful Bill going through. Obviously, there's been a tremendous amount of interest and media about it. And thanks to everyone who asked for some of my quotes and feedback and whatnot. Was in on a lot of stuff. Obviously, we're really got our our ear to the pavement on all this and trying to make sure that number one, I understand the latest of what's going on and try to communicate as effectively as I can to you all. I don't always get it all right. I definitely make mistakes, but really trying to thoroughly understand what's going on and communicate as best I can back to our network and whatnot here. So with the Big Beautiful Bill stuff, I've got lots of materials on YouTube. And if you search 45Z and Big Beautiful Bill, you'll find a bunch of different stuff online as to the updates. But main things, it should really help the U.S. corn soybean market because of the restrictions for foreign feedstocks coming in. Also, of course, the improvements to indirect land use change and getting that out of the 45Z program, really important to really strengthen that USMCA feedstock, especially our American feedstock here, going into these liquid biofuels. So since the big beautiful bill passed, a lot of people talking about 45Z, people paying attention to it. But and there's been multiple companies that have announced selling tax credits and whatnot. Gevo announced, I believe it was a $25 million sale of 45Z tax credits, and I know that there's others that are working on stuff. And of course, Harvestone already had announced that they've got a buyer. They announced that, shoot, probably almost, well, not quite a year ago, but late last year, at least over 6 months ago. So there are some of these biofuel producers that are really rolling to make sure that they have a buyer for their credits. I think that's really important. And same thing as on the farm too, right? We can create CI certificates. We can create the asset, verify it. We know that it has potential to drive tremendous value, but if we don't have a buyer for it, can't really move forward and create the asset and create supply unless we know for certain that the demand is there. And so there are biofuel producers that are moving forward with that, making sure that they line up the demand. And they're just selling a tax credit. And in the US, there are a tremendous amount of taxes that are paid every year by corporates and by players that would be target to be the off takers of these tax credits. And they're just buying tax credits. They don't have to be in the ag industry. They don't have to be in biofuels. Your, a tax credit was created. It's worth $1 off of your taxes. You sell that tax credit to a different taxpayer because you've got excess credits and you can't use them themselves. They, of course, want some incentive to buy them. They can either pay the government a full dollar or they can pay that tax credit seller an average of 90 to 94 cents on the dollar. Maybe it'll be a little bit lower than that if you don't have good assurance behind your credit. If you aren't super bulletproof in your verification system and don't have a lot of good data put together, any risk, the tax credit buyer is not going to take on that risk. They're absolutely going to push it onto the seller. They're going to demand that the assurances are there, potential for insurance in that space, talking with companies there that are insuring these deals, which adds additional cost to the seller, of course, but it makes the buyer more comfortable that what they're buying is a legit and insured product. So, in order to get your biofuel plant in position where you can sell for north of 90 cents on the dollar, your tax credits, it takes data and you got to go through audits and make sure that your credits are insured, that they are backed by your CPA, that they're backed by the tax credit broker. This is a process and takes some time and money, but there's serious dollars to be had by every biofuel producer, and there's a significant market for these for these tax credits. So we got to get this going. It does not happen overnight. We've been working a lot with Mickelson and Co. I don't have the final dates in front of me, but we do have a webinar coming up in a couple weeks with Mickelson and Co. And our friend Faith over there, who is a tax credit broker. They are huge in this market and based out of Sioux Falls, where they are in prime position to help sell the tax credits coming out of biofuel. And there's not just 45Z credits. We need to keep that in mind, especially as farmers. Some of these plants may be getting 45Q credits. Some of these plants are getting investment tax credits or others. There's a wide array of different tax credits that are out there, and some of them can be sold in these secondary markets. So, but point being, some of the biggest things we've seen since Big Beautiful Bill are some of these deals are starting to happen. And offtake agreements are happening between the biofuel producer and these buyers. And if you're a biofuel producer and you're not getting that figured out, I really encourage you to do so. Talk with your CPA firm or talk with Mickelson and Co. I'm happy to connect you with those folks because you need to know what's going to be the cash flow coming in from the offtake of your tax credits so you know what type of program you can roll out for your internal reductions to actually create the credits. And that's how the cash flow and all this stuff works, right? So, biofuel producer, you either utilize the tax credit dollar for dollar on your own taxes, or you take the tax credit and sell it to a secondary buyer. And we know now that they are transferable through the entirety of the program. So that's a key thing and why this is so important. You can create your tax credits, sell them to a secondary buyer. That's what generates the cash flow coming in. And they can start generating some of that cash flow upon signing these contracts and pay some of those quarterly, basically kind of like paying quarterly estimate payments. You got to have a settle up at the end. You got to make sure everything is all level out at the end, but that's where the cash comes from and all this. So determine who's going to buy your tax credits, lock in a contract, start some cash flowing, and you utilize that cash to actually buy the data and implement the program necessary to actually generate the verified tax credits and be able to actually sell them to that buyer. So, um, here's a question coming in from an anonymous attendee. Is Continuum going to help draft legislative resolutions or policy that tie 45Z eligibility to verified farmer compensation to mandate revenue sharing between ethanol producers and farmers? So I don't know of any of that is going on, and I've heard this come up multiple times, right? Of the can we get farmers kind of for certain tied in to the legislative actions, essentially. I know there was a little bit of push and effort going on for that. I believe the Renewable Fuels Association had brought that up. That's something that they are fighting for. And their president, Jeff Cooper, I think I heard the corn growers talking about it as well. So I know that they were trying to get that done within Big Beautiful Bill to kind of put into the actual statute, put in there that the feedstock must be included and that, certain percentages must be shared with the farmers and whatnot. Now, of course, that did not happen so far. I haven't been pushed on that much because I'm in the camp of like, what else are they gonna do? Number one. But number two, we know that it's the intent of Congress to have the feedstock included. We know that it's their intent because They just said the feedstock's got to be from USMCA, and they made the ruling about indirect land use change. And they've historically, of course, has been speaking very positively about this, and they, tying in manure-based products and whatnot as well. Like very much looking at what is the feedstock here. Plus, we already have the emissions table from the IRS from the previous administration about all of the feedstocks that will be included. And really, at this point, unless you have a carbon capture system, the only other major lever that you can pull on to decarbonize is the feedstock. So if feedstock and farmers aren't included, this thing's just not going to be near as robust. There's not going to be near as much credits generated or money flowing. Like the farmers are about 50% of the equation in the biofuel producers' total emissions. Like the farmers are a massive chunk of this and have the opportunity to be a massive CI reducer. And we've proven that. We've proven that farmers on average already have a CI score about 60% lower than what the default is and what we're given credit for. So there's a huge reduction on average, right? Your corn today has a default score of 29.1. We found that the average is actually 11.5 across our network. That's a 17.6 point reduction, which is worth about $1.02 per bushel in shareable value, right? It goes to the ethanol plant first, or it's worth $1.02 to that tax credit buyer, $1.02 worth of credit. The biofuel producer gets a percentage of that, the farmer, the cost of generating all this stuff, but plenty of money to go around. So I I continue to push on my folks in DC to make sure that the farmers are included, that the farmers aren't forgotten about. Um, I don't know how much of it has to be in actual legislative action to get that done. Because, like I'm saying, for sure it's all implied. For sure, we saw Senator Grassley really pushing on Secretary Bassett. Secretary Bassett is the Secretary of Treasury, and Grassley just a couple months ago was really pushing on him, saying, "Are you going to make sure that this is good for the farmers and make sure that their stuff is included?" And he was like, "Yeah, we're going to make sure that this is robust and good for the farmers." So I don't know. I feel like the intent is there. We've also seen our Secretary of Ag as well. She's been talking so highly about 45Z and making sure that it's good for the farmers. So I don't know. I feel like there's enough people that understand that the farmer piece has got to be included. You really don't move the needle very much on your reduction without the farmers or without a carbon capture system. Those are the two major drivers. Carbon capture is 32 points. The farmers, like I said, on average, we're seeing 17 and a half points. Um, Other stuff just doesn't move the needle very much. So I think those are really important ones that have got to be in there. And I am hearing that the Department of Energy is working on updating the 45Z CF GREET model, and that a feedstock calculator will be included in these updates. So I obviously I don't know for certain yet, but gosh, I mean, if there's not feedstock included in this, it's just, I mean, it's a complete mess from what Congress's intent was. Um, Maybe we do need to go like figure out how to get it actually written in and make a new amendment or whatever. I don't know what that process would be or if there's interest in doing that or where that could get plugged in. I did have there is chatter about a new a new mega bill to happen later, obviously, as uh clearly Trump's got a lot of power in Congress right now and pushing really hard, and I think going to continue to be aggressive to utilize it. So maybe there'll be some more mega packages later on and opportunity to get this included in there. I've always been in the camp of like, we know that that's the intent of this program. And it seems like there's enough people that are in charge and writing the rules that they understand that the farmer piece needs to be included. Now, how do we get the farmer piece included to actually get a share of the money? I think that's farmer. You got to understand what your data is worth. And you got to understand what it's worth to that biofuel producer. We got to have some collaboration here and work together. If I know that my data is worth, if I know that my CI score would generate $1.50 in tax credit, I know that I'm not going to get anywhere close to $1.50. I'm not going to get anywhere close to a dollar of that $1.50. That is not realistic. But I know that my data is not worth 5 cents. I know that I shouldn't be selling it for 9 cents, So you just need to know what your score is, understand ballpark what your data is going to be worth. And I think it's better for the biofuel producer as well to give farmers their equitable share of this. That's how you're going to recruit more people. You need volume to move the needle. And if you've got better incentive for the low CI producers to come to you, you're going to generate more credits and you're going to have a bigger pie and you're going to get a bigger slice of that pie as well. So um, I think that's really true. That's really important. But trust but verify. Why not? I'm not sure I'm following there. Um, we're really pushed on the ISO audits and verification because there's a tremendous amount of precedent that there is going to be audits. There's going to be verification required in this space. It was already laid out in the 40B guidance, which did get extended to part of this year in the SAF space. In the draft guidance from the Biden administration, they were pointing to the same ISO audits. It's ISO 14065. That is the main audit for, the main protocol for these type of greenhouse gas emissions uh, processes or schemes to calculate it. It's a global standard. And then there's ISO 14064, which talk about how a company like Continuum has to go about auditing or has to go about verifying its customers and get that audited by an accredited third party. And that's what we've got set up. So I don't even think it's going to be hey, you could verify or you could choose not to. Like the precedent would say it's going to be required if you want to get these credits. And we can do it. And we're doing it for about 3 cents a bushel. So it's work, but it can absolutely get done. So um okay, other ways, Nebraska legislative bill passed in 2021 created the legal and regulatory framework for carbon capture and sequestration, CCS, allowing ethanol producers and other industrial facilities to inject captured CO2 into deep underground geological formations using Class 6 wells. Ethanol plants don't need farmers to get money from 45Z according to the law. Yeah, that's true. I thoroughly understand that. So you can say, now screw the farmers, not going to do anything with the farmer. I've got a carbon capture system. I'm only going to do that and mer. But that's like, why leave a whole bunch of money on the table, though, I guess is what I'm suggesting. So if you've got carbon capture, like in Nebraska, they already have the tall grass pipeline, right? It's already there. They can tap into that, pump the CO2 back out to Wyoming because they had been pumping natural gas to the east. Now turn around and pump CO2 back to the west and put it back down in the hole that the natural gas came out of or close to it. And so you're right that they could say, no, farmer, sorry, you're out. See ya. We're just going to get our carbon capture thing going and do that. But also, I mean, farmers, if you're in Nebraska and you're part of one of these ethanol plants, and if you're a member owner, like, gosh darn, I mean, make sure that at least your plants that are farmer owned, make sure that you're not doing this, number one, but also some of the other major players out there being ADM and Poet, they've already been doing CI pilot projects and they're rolling out stuff right now. So they're pre-enrollment mostly for their European markets. I get it. They're not doing anything. I've not seen anything about 45Z yet. They're waiting for the final guidance. But I understand that a biofuel producer could move forward and not share anything with the farmer. And they could take the 32 points of reduction from the carbon capture. That's where, at 2 cents per point per gallon, or a little bit more than that. It's there's 62 or 64 cents a gallon that they can have there and not have the farmers involved at all. And they can absolutely do that. You have a bunch of really torqued off farmers that are sitting there saying, we've got data, we've got low carbon practices as well. Why would you not include us in this when we've already got it put together for you? And it's not going to cost you a whole lot if you play your cards right and work with the right types of softwares. Obviously, that's the whole point of Continuum Ag here, is to make that process seamless and streamlined. And we can do it for a couple cents a bushel. It's not like it's that big of a cost in the grand scheme of this whole thing. And if you've got the carbon capture of 32 points, plus you add on the farmers, like I said, we're seeing an average reduction of 17.6 CI points from the farmers. You add those two things together, you get pretty dang close to a 50 CI point reduction and close to maxing out this credit and close to having carbon neutral or a CI score zero biofuel. And like, isn't that the goal here? So I think there's a lot of opportunity to make sure that the farmers are stacked with the carbon capture if they have it. It's my understanding that carbon capture is not happening right now. Somebody in Nebraska, correct me if I'm wrong, if they are sequestering carbon right now, I have not heard that they are. So especially for the 2025 season, then if you're not capturing carbon right now, farmer's the only other option that's the only other major option that's on the table. So let's go. And why not have both? I guess if you're already set up to do it, I don't know why you would leave. I don't know why you would purposefully leave millions of dollars on the table. That to me is just not a good idea. And I would sure hope that if you are a member owner of an ethanol plant that its board is actively choosing to leave money on the table, I don't know. I guess being a on boards and stuff myself, I understand fiduciary responsibility. And I would assume that some of that would have to be questioned if you're going to actively leave money on the table. I understand there's cost. I understand it takes people. I understand it takes time, and I understand we don't have the rules. Okay, so you can't necessarily make all the decisions today. I get it, but especially if we look at this over the next coming years, there's going to be plants that take advantage of this. There's going to be money to be had. Congress has given us a massive gift here. I don't know why we would squander it and not take advantage, especially as we know these programs are going to go away. A key long-term market in all this is sustainable aviation fuel. And if you've got ethanol that's got a CI score close to zero or at zero, that's going to make you extremely valuable in these LCFS markets or in the SAF space, like even beyond 45Z. And when that goes away, you're in an amazing position for other programs. So I think that's key. Is there time to amend the 45Z credit to include mandates for the farmer revenue sharing? When is the deadline to amend the rules? I don't know. So again, I there was some talk about trying to, you know, demand some of the feedstock stuff in the big beautiful bill. There was some stuff about it. It never really made it very far. So I don't know if there would be an additional resolution or an additional large bill that a provision like that could be added into and they could amend 45Z. I would assume that there's no timeline on when you have to or not amend 45Z. Now, what it may be is if you run out of time to amend the 2025 45Z program, they could say this goes into effect for calendar year 2026 or goes into effect at X date or whatever. So, and we've seen them do that. And even some of the provisions that they made in the big beautiful bill, they didn't necessarily all backdate to January 1 of 2025. Some of them start for tax year 2026. So, so that would be the thing. If there is going to be an amendment made that demands that they get the farmers in there, demands that they include the feedstock. I believe it could be basically plugged in whenever somebody wants to take action on it. And then it just depends on when it would go into effect. If it is delayed, it may not affect the 2025 biofuel production, but it could go into effect for a later year. That'd be my understanding on it. Deadline to amend the rules. So, and there's two different things here. So you've got the law that I believe that, like I was just explaining, could be amended at any time. It just may be different on when that actually gets implemented. But then the final IRS rules, because ultimately, remember, it's the IRS that it's in their hands now to say, here's the calculator, the feedstock needs to be included, here's how you verify it. Is it going to be book and claim or mass balance? That's all still to come with the IRS. So, like the farmer piece of all this, it's really the IRS that we need to be pushed on, and the USDA, who is helping them, and the Department of Energy, who we know is helping them as well. Like it is those three agencies that now have the mandate to go and write the rules. And again, my sources are saying that there is progress being made, and they're getting stuff out, and we can expect some things in the coming weeks and months. And even just last week, the IRS said that they will, or just last week, the IRS said what the adjustment for inflation is, and they increased the value of the credit by about 6%, six and some odd percent, adjusting for inflation. So like IRS is already putting out updates and stuff that impact 45Z. So they're aware, they're working on it. But ultimately, they get to write the rules. I don't believe they have any deadline to write any rules. And ultimately, of course, that was the issue that we're facing right now is the previous administration didn't get the rules finalized. And so now we're still sitting here with no rules. We've got some draft stuff, we've got some material that can be worked off of to write new rules. But unfortunately, we're still kind of sitting and waiting for the IRS. Strip till, so many ways of applying nutrition with the planter and sprayers, etc. Do we have to spend the huge amount of money on strip till equipment when we're already placing nutrients efficiently? No, you definitely don't have to. And I'll explain that a bit more. Who defines what the rules are so that there's so many ways to apply and so many equipment choices? So really, this boils down to what is the calculator going to be? Is it going to be the GREET FDCIC or the GREET feedstock carbon intensity calculator, which is what Continuum uses? Or are they going to go to a new USDA feedstock carbon intensity calculator like the previous USDA put out in January earlier this year? And under the under those models is really where it determines in what moves the needle. And so right now we utilize the GREET feedstock carbon intensity calculator. Um, that's what we've always been using, and I don't know if they're going to keep this USDA calculator. It is the GREET calculator is far superior to the USDA calculator, so I would anticipate that they would keep with it, but I'm not sure. But you can get your CI score for free at topsoil.ag, and you can toggle strip till versus conventional till versus no till. You can toggle fertilizer practices, and it'll show you exactly what moves the needle. This is county by county, so you're answer or asking the question anonymously. I don't know exactly where you are, but you can go to topsoil.ag or send me a note, and I can get you connected with one of my guys who'd be happy to help you run your score again completely for free and show you what moves the needle on the score. So reducing tillage does typically equate to more points than change in fertilizer practices, but reducing fertilizer practices, improving yield, those things move the needle as well in the GREET feedstock carbon intensity calculator. They don't move the needle in the USDA calculator. There's a some for split applying and whatnot, like a point or something like that. But in the GREET FDCIC, reducing synthetic fertilizer and improving yield does move the needle, and I think it should. But yes, there are a multitude of different practices that move the needle. There's no word that bundling will come back. It's all pick your practices, plug it into the calculator, it spits out the score, you get that verified, and kumbaya, here we go. So, anyway, some good questions there. I think it all boils down to you need to know what your score is. You need to understand these programs and understand the value of your data. There's no money moving today. And what I continue to say is your data is worth zero today or very close to it. Your plant might be doing some small pilot or something like that. But your data is worth very close to zero today, and it will remain worth zero unless you get your data put together and get yourself in position to capitalize on this program. So it all takes data, especially as we go to the secondary market to sell the tax credits. Those folks are extremely sophisticated buyers. We're going to hear more about that in a webinar coming up with Mickelson and Co. As we wrap, I do think we're going to skip next week. I got to be out of town, but we'll be back the week after next with more updates here. And stay tuned, of course, online. You can see some of our old material on our YouTube or podcast page. Continue to put out as much material as we can here. If your ethanol plant wants to have a conversation or your elevator wants to have a conversation, I would be happy to join those. We got to keep educating folks and moving everyone in the right direction here. So anyway, that's what I got. I got to run. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you back in 2 weeks. See ya.